This is Propping Up Weak Hives. Thank you for watching. I am Kevin England. In this lesson, we'll give some shape to what a weak hive looks like. We'll tell you how to recognize the problem if you're going in and doing an inspection, and how to do some assessments. We'll cover some corrective actions, and we'll end with the concept that this is not something that's very typical, but if you have a weak hive, there's time to correct the situation. If you have a weak hive, you probably know it already. These are generally not acute problems that pop up overnight. Especially if you have two hives, you can compare one to the other and tell that one is an underperformer. Learning what is good, as we've discussed in previous lesson, also helps you to understand if a hive is just not doing what it should be doing. If your sense is your hive is not quite right, follow through the lesson, take corrective actions, and or come and speak to your Beekeepers Association or one of our online sessions in order to get some guidance on how to get through. For the purposes of this lesson, we'll define a weak hive as one that is not on a trajectory to go into overwinter. Bees need to survive all the way to February, March, even April of next year. And whatever the cause, if they're not prepared to have plenty of healthy bees, 60 to 80 pounds of stores, proper comb, then you need to take corrective actions now to prop them up so that they're ready for overwinter state. When it comes to assessing and correcting the situation, you have to break the problem down into its parts. First thing you'll look at is the bees. How are they doing? If the population is not where you want it, if the bees are not healthy, then it's a matter of correcting it with good nutrition and varroa control. Food stores, they'll bring in enough pollen generally to keep the colony going, but you may have to feed to pack them in to make sure that they have plenty of nectar to build the future bees and also honey storage to get over winter. If it comes to honeycomb is not in good shape, there's a couple things we'll suggest, but most of the time that's a problem better corrected when a nectar flow is on. They may or may not build out some honeycomb this time of year, and we'll talk more of that as we get through the lesson. Another critical aspect of assess and correct is how is your queen doing? Ideally, your queen has laid good patterns all through spring. She's kept operational to some extent through the dearth and is going to pick up here in the fall when they start to build winter bees. If you find that your brood patterns aren't well, your colony is deficient in some ways, it may be possible that you are looking at a queen replacement. If you feel like that's the case, reach out to us through an online session and we'll consult with you as to what you have going on and give you some guidance. But at the end, the colony is only as good as the queen is producing. One of the first things to do in assess and correct is get a report card. How did the colony do through the season up until this September time frame? That is where we are here, end of August and into September time frame when you're going to do this assessment. Did you get 20 frames built? 30 if it's a medium. Are there a reasonable quantity of bees? How is the food stores at this current time and what needs to be done in order to correct that situation? And is the queen still producing brood? What does the pattern look like? Are there any disease states? Do a full assessment of your colony from stem to stern, and then based on your report card, line up your actions to correct any weaknesses the colony may have. As you assess the report card after you're done, you'll look at the conditions that you found and take some general actions like those listed on the slide. We're going to go through each one of these in a little detail in order to help give you guidance on what you should do based on what you found. If you have a low population, the most common approach is to stimulate the bees by feeding them one-to-one sugar solution. Stimulative feeding will help bolster the colony and get the queen laying additional eggs, which will improve the numbers you have in the colony. Another shortcut that you could take if you have a spare hive that's doing exceedingly well is to source a frame of brood in all stages. The obvious thing is you would take the frame and the bees, which would be nurse bees, and they're loyal to the brood, so they'd be okay to put in your colony to prop it up, but of course you don't want to bring your queen. An additional thing you might consider to do in order to bolster brood is to give them a pollen supplement, which we'll talk about in a moment. If you're looking through the colony and there just doesn't happen to be a lot of pollen stored, what can you do? You can buy a pollen supplement from a bee store or make your own. There are recipes out there on the internet. Most times we find in the mid-Atlantic region and in other places, bees can find plenty of access, and fresh pollen is better than any pollen supplement. However, if you find that there's a dearth of pollen, you can put pollen supplements on, and if the bees need them, they will take them down. It's worth a try if you are finding that you have low pollen counts in your colonies. If you do an assessment, your bees should be on their way to storing 60 to 80 pounds of honey. One frame holds around 10 to 11 pounds in a deep, and you can assess by doing an inspection how much capped honey they have. If you find that they're short or the boxes feel light and they should be very heavy with honey, then you could feed the bees 2 parts sugar to 1 part water, doesn't matter whether it's by weight or volume, in order to add weight. Unlike stimulative feeding, which is a 1-to-1 ratio, 2-to-1 coerces the bees to store the heavy syrup, and then they dry it out and cap it just as they would if they had a heavy nectar flow and were making honey. In your assessment, August is the time frame if you didn't take care of varroa mites or you had a weak colony going in to find that the bees are sick. You would want to monitor, treat if the thresholds are too high, and then monitor afterwards and continue to do your best to keep bees free from varroa mites and any problems that they vector when they are attacking the bees. This is the time of year where they reach their peak population, and if you're going to see a sick hive, this is when it would start to show up. If it is something else, you have European foul brood or other diseases, or just simply said in layman's terms, you're looking at brood and it's not pearly white, glistening in a puddle of royal jelly, it's yellow, it's ochre, it's different things, contact someone and ask them for some assistance. But one of the key things to do is if you have not done your varroa management plan, you need to proactively do that immediately in order to clean up your bees so that they will overwinter properly. Reiterating what was said a moment ago, if you find something alternative going on or you're just not sure, reach out to your Beekeepers Association or come back to us in an online meeting and we'll look to get you some help. There are some conditions that require medication, and in most locations nowadays, because of federal laws, they require medication as administered by a veterinarian. If you have something else going on after you've cleaned everything up from varroa mites, contact someone and look to get some assistance in your apiary. The assessment of brood patterns is a little bit tricky in summer, late summer, early fall, because sometimes the queen is laying haphazard patterns for a number of reasons. This is one where you just want to look at how the bees look in brood in all stages. How do the eggs look? How do the larvae look? How do the pupa look before they get capped? What do the bees look like when they're coming out? If everything looks normal and there's a reasonable amount of brood being produced, a tight pattern is not as important at this time of year. However, if you're seeing really haphazard, odd brood patterns, then you should report that, and that would potentially mean that you would be looking at a queen replacement. You want to do this as proactively as possible so that you can get a quality queen. At this time of year, August, September timeframe, queens that are well mated are running in short supply, and earlier corrections are imperative. So make sure that you assess your brood patterns, and if you find that something looks a little bit off, consult with someone and get some assistance as to what you should be doing. One of the last corrective actions takes a little bit of ingenuity to correct. Poor comb is not going to get corrected at this time of year. It's very hard to get the bees to build comb out of season when there's a heavy nectar flow. There's really not too much you can do other than rearrange your box if you have poor comb and put it in the outside, specifically in the bottom of the box. If you have bad comb in frames 1 and 10 coming out of winter, usually the bees will be in the top box and you could pull frames 1 and 10 with no bees on them and correct the situation in spring. Better yet, see if you have additional comb from somewhere, maybe in your stash or maybe you know a friend, and it's clean comb. You can pull your bad frames out and replace it with some comb that is well formed and try to get your colony through on 20 to 30 frames. If the situation is just a mess, you don't have really good comb enough to sustain a colony, maybe you have 6, 7 frames that are poorly formed, never got built, and that's not going to do very well in a 20 frame hive or a 30 frame hive. You might want to consider compacting down to a single box to maintain the colony where they have all good comb. All that is predicated on the size of your colony. If your colony is large enough that they're occupying every piece of comb that's available to them, then maybe you want to run through that. There is one other extensive action that you could do, which is to contact Better Bee. They sell pre-drawn better comb. It's a product that's a little bit pricey, but it comes shipped as drawn wax, and you can slide that right into the colony and bees readily accept it. You should do some homework on that action if that's what you want to do, and understand the pros and cons of using manufactured comb versus comb that the bees build. But if you're in dire straits, it may be something you can consider. Personally, I would think the best way to do it is to reach out to a local beekeepers association and see if someone would be willing to render you some comb. Many beekeepers have comb in stash, and they can give you clean, viable comb to help supplement your operation, and someday you may end up paying them forward. Look into your options and do your best to solve your comb problems. Here's a word of support to end this lesson, as most beekeepers by this junction do not deal with weak colonies. If the colony was weak, they probably have already taken corrective actions, and at this juncture your colony should be on the rebound. If, however, you find yourself in the camp of a weak colony, don't dismay. The number one thing you could do is feed your bees. Nutrition and storage help to correct most of the problems that you have with a bee operation, and if you give them food, it will turn them around quite quickly. Again, if in doubt, reach out to someone and ask for some guidance. Express to them what you've seen here and have them confirm the direction, maybe even have them come out and look at your colony, which would be a better way to assess what you have going on and get you some advice. This lesson was about propping up weak hives, giving you some ideas of where the problems occur and how to correct them. Our next topic is going to move to equipment and comb storage for the winter, dealing with wax moths, which become a problem later in the fall, and winterizing your hives. If you have any questions, you can ask at our next online session. You can also send an email to the address on the slide. If you're watching from YouTube, you can leave a comment below. If you're on our website, click over the video on the YouTube link to go to YouTube and subscribe while you're there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the next lesson.